May 1945. Bavaria, Germany. The surrender processing had been completely routine for 20 minutes. German officers sitting at the table, American officers across from them. Documents being reviewed, questions being asked, answers being given. General Major Ernst Waldmann sat at the head of his officers, calm, professional, cooperative. Everything exactly as it should be. Then his subordinate, Captain Roth, started talking. He was trying to save himself. He told the American officers that the orders for the civilian executions in March 1945 had come directly from Waldmann, that he had objected, that he had tried to stop it, that Waldmann alone was responsible. He said it clearly, confidently, looking at the American officers and not at Waldmann. The American officers wrote it down, every word. Patton was standing at the side of the room, watching. Waldmann listened to every word. His face showed nothing. Then he stood up and slapped Roth across the face. So hard the sound echoed off the walls of the room. Every American guard reached for their weapon. Every German officer pushed back from the table. Every person in that room went completely still, except Waldmann. He sat back down, straightened his uniform, and looked directly at the American officers across the table. Then he said something that nobody in that room was prepared to hear. Subscribe before we continue. We tell the stories that show who people really were. To understand what Waldmann did and why he did it, you need to understand what had happened in March 1945. 2 months earlier, a small Bavarian village, American forces were advancing rapidly. Waldmann's unit was responsible for the area. Intelligence reports had identified 17 civilians suspected of providing information to American scouts. Suspected, not confirmed, not proven, suspected. Waldmann had received pressure from above. Deal with the situation, secure the area, eliminate threats to the advance. The language was deliberate, bureaucratic, designed to be interpreted. Waldmann had interpreted it. He had ordered the executions, all 17, in a field behind the village. Roth had been present, had given no objection, had watched it happen, had signed the documentation afterward. For 2 months, Waldmann had carried that decision, not because he was proud of it, not because he believed it was justified, but because it was done, and he was the one who had ordered it. And the war was ending, and he knew what that meant. He had decided, somewhere between March and May, that he would not lie about it. He had not shared that decision with his officers. He had not told Roth what he intended to say when the time came. He had simply decided. And now he was sitting in a Bavarian processing room, watching his subordinate build, a story in which Roth was an innocent man who had tried to stop what Waldmann alone had done. The slap was not a plan, but it was not a mistake either. Patton had watched everything from the side of the room. He had seen Roth's performance. He had seen Waldmann's face while it was happening, and he had made a decision before the echo of the slap had finished moving through the room. He walked to the table, sat down, and asked one question. Patton looked at Waldmann. "Why did you do that?" Not shouted, not aggressive, just direct. Waldmann looked at him. Because he was about to escape something he should carry. Patton was quiet for a moment. "Explain." Waldmann looked at Roth, then back at Patton. "In March, I gave an order. He carried it out. He did not object. He did not refuse. He signed the documentation afterward." He paused. "Now he is telling you," he objected, "that he tried to stop it, that I alone am responsible." He said it without anger, just as a statement of fact. That is not true. And he knows it is not true. And I will not sit here and let him perform a conscience he did not have in March. Patton looked at Roth. Roth's hand was still on his cheek. "Is what he's saying accurate?" Roth said nothing. "I am asking you a direct question, Captain." Roth looked at the table. "Yes, sir." Patton looked at Waldmann. "You understand what you're doing?" Waldmann nodded. "I'm telling the truth." Patton said, "You are also convicting yourself." Waldmann looked at him. "I was already convicted the moment I gave the order." He said it with complete simplicity. Not dramatically, not for effect. Just as a fact he had been living with for 2 months. I just hadn't said it out loud yet. Patton studied him. The room was completely silent. The American officers had stopped writing. The German officers were not moving. The guards were watching Patton. Patton said, "What were the names of the 17 people you executed?" Waldmann was quiet for a moment. "I don't know all of them." Patton looked at him. "You ordered their deaths and you don't know their names." Waldmann met his eyes. "No." He paused. "I knew they were suspected of providing information. I knew the village they were from. I did not know their names. Patton was quiet for a long moment. He looked at his legal officers standing near the door. I want full statements from both of them. Everything. Every order given, every order followed, every signature on every document. He looked at Waldmann, all of it. Waldmann nodded. Yes, sir. Patton looked at Roth. And you. Whatever you put in your statement will be compared to his. He gestured at Waldmann. If there are inconsistencies, we will know who is lying. He stood, walked back to the wall. Let the processing continue. What followed was 3 hours of statements. Waldmann's was exhaustive. Dates, locations, the exact language of the orders he received, the exact language of the orders he gave, his reasoning at the time, his understanding now. Nothing minimized, nothing qualified, nothing softened, just what happened. Roth's statement told the same facts, but in different language, full of context, full of pressures and constraints, full of the atmosphere of the time, full of everything except the simple acknowledgement that he had done it willingly. Patton read both statements that evening in his quarters. He read Waldmann's first, then Roth's, then Waldmann's again. Then he called his legal officer. Waldmann's statement is the most honest account I have read from any German officer since the surrender began. His legal officer agreed. It won't help him. What he ordered was a war crime. Patton said, I know, but make sure the tribunal has both statements, and make sure they understand what means that one of these men told the truth before he was required to. The tribunal convened 6 weeks later. Both men were convicted. But what Waldmann said at the end of the proceedings was the moment that everyone who was present remembered for the rest of their lives. The tribunal had heard everything. The March executions documented in full. Both statements read into the record. Witnesses called. Evidence presented. The verdict was never in doubt. Both men were guilty. The tribunal sentenced Waldmann to 15 years. Roth received 8. When Waldmann was asked if he had anything to say before sentencing was finalized, he said, no. He thought for a moment then, actually, yes. He looked at the tribunal. The man who will serve 8 years beside me has spent these proceedings constructing a version of himself that he can live with. He paused. I don't know if he will succeed. I hope he doesn't, not because I want him to suffer, but because a man who convinces himself he is less responsible than he is learns nothing, and the 17 people who died in that village deserve to be learned from. He looked at his hands. I ordered their deaths without knowing their names. That is not a detail. That is the whole story. I gave an order about people I had reduced to a category. Suspected civilians, potential threats, not people with names and families and reasons to live. Just a category. He looked up at the tribunal. If I had known their names, I don't know if I would have given the order. Maybe I would have. I don't know, but I should have known, and I didn't. And that is on me, not on anyone else, on me. He sat down. The tribunal was silent for a long moment. The chief judge wrote something in his notes. The session was closed. Waldmann was let out. Roth did not look at him as they left the room. Patton was not present for the tribunal, but his legal officer had attended and reported back. He told Patton what Waldmann had said. Patton was quiet for a moment. Then he said, find out the names of the 17 people. His officer looked at him. Sir, the civilians, the ones from the village, find their names. His officer wrote it down. Why, sir? Patton was already looking at the next document on his desk, because someone should know them. It took 2 weeks to compile the list. 17 names. Bavarian civilians, ages ranging from 19 to 67, 7 women, 10 men, farmers, a school teacher, a baker, a postal worker, 3 members of the same family. Patton read the list once, folded it, put it in his desk drawer. His aide asked him what he was going to do with it. Patton said, nothing. He paused. I'm just going to know it. Ernst Waldmann served 9 years of his 15-year sentence. Released in 1954, he returned to his hometown. Found work as a bookkeeper. Small firm. Unremarkable work. He never gave a public interview. Never joined any veterans organization. Never spoke about the war outside his immediate family. His daughter later said that her father was the quietest man she had ever known. Not sad quiet. Just quiet. Like someone who had decided that he had said everything that needed to be said in a Bavarian tribunal room in 1945 and had nothing to add. Heinrich Roth served 4 years. He was released in 1949. He moved first to Hamburg, then to South America. His family lost contact with him in the early 1960s. Whether he found the version of himself he was looking for, nobody recorded. Patton wrote about the day of the slap in a letter to Beatrice the evening it happened. He wrote, "Saw something today I don't know what to do with. A German general slapped his own officer for lying about what they had both done, then confessed everything, voluntarily, completely, knowing it would cost him years. I've spent 30 years in uniform watching men avoid accountability, finding reasons, finding language, finding someone else to point at. This man didn't do any of that. He said we both did it and we both carry it." And then he sat back down and waited for the consequences. He paused in the letter. "I still think he should have refused the original order. I still think what he did was wrong. But I've been thinking all evening about what it takes to sit in a room and refuse to perform innocence when innocence is available, when you could take it and nobody could prove otherwise, and to choose not to, because the people who died deserved someone to own what happened to them." He ended the letter. "I don't know what to do with that, but I think it matters. I think it matters more than most of what I saw today." Beatrice wrote back, "What did you do with the names?" Patton's answer was one line, "I put them in my desk, so someone knows them." If you had been in that room when Waldmann slapped his own officer, what would you have done? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories about the moments that showed who people really were, subscribe. You're in Patton's army now.